this is a team that could be looking at a top 4 seed, top 2 seed potentially in the Western Conference. So while the Mavs got better, yeah, the Suns got better, yeah, I still pretty much believe in this Pelicans team and what they're capable of doing.
I want to talk about Russell Westbrook because you said something very, very interesting, how him going to Utah directly affects the New Orleans Pelicans. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, I mean, the Pelicans and the Lakers are very tied together, even still from the Anthony Davis trade a couple of years ago. You know, this year in particular, the Pelicans have the right to swap first-round picks with the Lakers, so they're going to get the better of the two. Well, if the Lakers, when they looked really bad to start the year, it looked like that could have been the top overall pick, and all of a sudden you have Wemby coming to New Orleans, a once-in-a-generational big man prospect. It makes people who are Pelicans fans pretty excited, but as the Lakers had a very good trade deadline, I thought, that kind of devalues that pick. The Pelicans still might finish better, but they might only, say, improve their draft slot by 4 or 5 picks potentially instead of jumping all the way into the lottery or something along those lines. So the teams are very much tied together, mainly because of draft compensation in the future. If you're a Pelicans fan, you want the Lakers to be as bad as possible for the next couple of years. They also still own one other first-round pick from the Lakers that's going to be in 1 to 2 years up to the Pelicans. So watching that team be bad is important, but, you know, getting Westbrook, I think, out of LA really does improve them. Getting Jared Vanderbilt back, Malik Beasley, D'Angelo Russell, much more depth than they've had at any point in time this season, I think certainly helps them. Getting a good shooter and putting him around LeBron James seems like a good idea. So Beasley was a good pickup there. They had another good move in getting a backup center in Mo Bamba. I like what they did at the trade deadline. It's kind of annoying being a Pelicans fan.
So a lot of movement within the Western Conference. Are you feeling more hopeful, or are you feeling more pessimistic just based on kind of the shift in the balance of power, especially within the Western Conference?
I feel fine, to be perfectly honest. You know, the West, it's an arms race right now. It started with the Kyrie Irving trade going to Dallas, which was then pretty much followed up soon after with the Kevin Durant news that broke at like midnight the other night. You know, and then you saw teams like the Clippers make some kind of medium level moves to improve them a little bit. The Lakers really retooling their roster. It's competitive out there, and the West is pretty jumbled up, right? The Pelicans went on a 10-game losing streak and are still only 2 games back of the 4th seed in the Western Conference. It could go any direction right now for a number of these teams. So you look at that and it's easy, I think, to panic a little bit. The Suns got Kevin Durant, Kyrie going to the Mavs. You got to keep up with all of that. But I've said all along, I believe this Pelicans team is pretty good. You know, this is a team that was first in the West. They've been second in the West. They held third in the West for a long time without Brandon Ingram. You know, when you look at this Pelicans team, it's tough to actually say like what they are. You know, are they a strong playoff team? Are they a play-in tournament team? Are they a title contender? We don't really know because we haven't gotten enough games of them being healthy to really have that kind of read on this roster just yet. You know, you've gotten 10 games, I think it is, out of Brandon Ingram, Zion Williamson, and CJ McCollum all together. That's not going to quite work. You need more than that to really truly understand what this team is made of. So to hold third in the West for a long time with the injuries that they've been experiencing, I think is a really good sign that this team could be really, really good. You know, Zion's only played 29 games this year. Brandon Ingram's only played 21 games this year. You know, neither guy getting above 30. If they all play together and they've been this good already, I think this is a team that could be looking at a top 4 seed, top 2 seed potentially in the Western Conference. So while the Mavs got better, yeah, the Suns got better, yeah, I still pretty much believe in this Pelicans team and what they're capable of doing.
Curious, can you update our listeners? Just, you mentioned the injuries that the Pelicans need to recover from. What is the timeline on that? Who's impacted right now? And are they going to be able to get together and kind of mesh or gel before the playoffs start?
There's one name you got to look at here, and it's Zion Williamson. You know, they've been without Brandon Ingram for 20-something games. He was dealing with a toe contusion that kept him out longer than we would have liked, but he's come back. He's kind of rounded back into form. In the past couple of games, he's played really well, including a big win over the Lakers a week ago. He torched the Atlanta Hawks on Tuesday night. He looks back. The only other guy they're truly worried about right now is Zion Williamson. That's the engine that makes the car go. This is a guy that was going to be an all-star starter this year, but he's not going to end up playing in the game. So we're not going to see him before the All-Star break. They have 3 games remaining. He's not going to play in the All-Star game. We're likely going to see him immediately after the All-Star break. So this gives him about 2-3 more weeks to really get fully healthy. He's dealing with a grade 2 hamstring strain. Those are the type of injuries that you just got to follow like the doctor's guidance on, right? It's like 2 weeks, then you reevaluate, then 2 more weeks, then you reevaluate, and then 2 more weeks, and maybe they can play. Zion's right on that timeline. There hasn't been any setback or anything like that I've heard of just yet. So I expect to see him immediately after the All-Star break. The good news for the Pelicans here, who've been waiting to just finally get healthy, is they have the 5th easiest schedule the rest of the way after the All-Star break. So as I mentioned earlier, they're 2 games out of the 4th seed. You get Zion back, you have a fully healthy team here that was first place in the Western Conference at one point. Maybe you do go on a run. Can they go something, like 20, and it's about 25 games left, so not 20, but could you go like 15-10, something like that can really kind of boost you up the standing significantly, or better than that, right? And I wouldn't be shocked if that's something that New Orleans is capable of doing. I think this team is deep. There's a lot of talent there that's young, up-and-coming talent that's growing throughout the season. You're top-heavy, but you're really good with those guys there. I'm curious to see what they're going to look like, assuming they stay healthy the rest of the way, but it's waiting on Zion Williamson, and we're going to have to wait till after the All-Star break.
You follow this team in depth, and Zion's been one of the most fascinating players ever since he was at Duke, and just not to mention all he was a social media sensation even before Duke. Are you optimistic that he can be consistent through future NBA seasons as a star in this league?
It's tough, right? Injuries are tricky to talk about. I'm not a doctor, right? We don't get a lot of the medicals on these injuries to really kind of have the full picture. So you kind of see someone who's missed parts of every year that he's played, including a whole missed season. And I get that it's easy to kind of look at that and be like, oh, this guy's never going to be healthy, right? Look at a guy like Anthony Davis. It's always something, isn't it? I also think some of these things are just kind of fluky, right? Like he was in the middle of the game, kind of pulled up he pulled a hamstring, right? Like I don't know how you're supposed to kind of prevent those sorts of things. And when you look at the injuries to Zion Williamson, none of them are the exact same thing, and they don't necessarily appear to be connected, right? He's fully healed from that foot injury, so it didn't impact this hamstring injury that he's dealing with. His rookie year, it was a knee injury. That wasn't tied to the foot injury 2 years later because he actually had a very healthy season in between all of that. It's tough to really make of that. And I don't have a good answer for you other than I just kind of look at all injuries as just like kind of fluke things, because what can you really do? And from talking to injury experts around the league, team doctors, they kind of view it as that. You try and do as much preventative work as you can. And Zion is doing all of that. This past off season, he really recommitted himself to basketball, working with a personal trainer in the off season, has a personal chef to keep him eating right, to avoid some of the weight gain that he's put on. And part of it is just he's a freak athlete and kind of one of one as they describe him. He eats, he puts on weight, and he has to eat a lot when you kind of have that kind of body and play the style that he does, right? So he's working on those sorts of things. And I think that's all you can really ask for. Maybe injuries are going to occur, maybe not, but he's kind of controlling everything that he can control to try and minimize that for the future. That's what you want out of a guy.
Another thing that's been talked about with the Pelicans, I think quite a bit over the last few years, is the dynamic between Ingram and Zion. A lot of people saying, like, ultimately you're going to have to choose between one or the other. But it seems like these are pretty versatile guys. What do you make, as someone who covers the team, what do you make of their dynamic, their relationship, and like long-term viability of that pairing?
Yeah, look, they work together. There's no doubt in my mind when I hear people say like, oh, they don't fit, like that's someone who's not watching the team a lot. I can tell you that, right? They've had seasons where they've played the majority of it. 2 years ago when Stan Van Gundy was the head coach, they played 80% of the season together, right? That's a good enough sample size, I think, to kind of understand that. Brandon Ingram had been an all-star the year before, and that season when he played entirely with Zion, he put up the same numbers as his all-star year. I'm going to say it's pretty good there. Zion was an all-star starter that year too. So they've worked together. They can coexist. I don't really see that being as much of a problem. They're good friends. They're not like out partying all the time with each other, but they get along fine. In fact, the team chemistry on this Pelican squad is really, really high. They really like each other. They really enjoy hanging out with each other, enjoy playing basketball with each other. But you have two guys, Zion's a current all-star. B.I.'s been a past all-star. And if you look at their numbers of the past couple couple seasons, BI especially, they are remarkably consistent. 23, 24, 25 points per game, somewhere in that range. Really similar assist numbers, really similar rebound numbers, really similar shooting percentages. Those are the type of things you want to see from it. It means he can adapt his game. He was an all-star without Zion. Zion comes back, it changed his shot selection completely, and he still put up the exact same numbers. That speaks a lot to Brandon Ingram and how he can work around others and make the team better too. And that, being a mid-range assassin like that, you need a guy like that because that's going to be open, especially in the postseason. And that's why he averaged almost 30 points per game against the Phoenix Suns in their first-round playoff series last year. So I think they're fine long-term. You're just committing a lot of salary to that. It can make team building a little bit tougher, but the salary cap is going to go up every year after that when the new CBA, when they eventually get that done and the new TV deal gets done too. That I think will ease things on New Orleans too, but they definitely feel that they have a special pairing here between those two guys.
Another huge addition, of course, has been CJ McCollum. Can you talk about his leadership, his impact as a veteran presence on this team? And do you sense there might be a little bit of regret in Portland for letting him go to New Orleans and seeing how he's been flourishing there?
Yeah, sometimes you need an adult in the room is the way I kind of describe it. And that's CJ McCollum, right? He's the president of the Players Association. This is like the elder statesman that kind of commands a lot of respect. And they've tried, and it's a young team. Brandon Ingram's still young. He's been in the league for a while. Zion's still young. You have a number of other young guys, Trey Murphy, Herb Jones, Najee Marshall, Jose Alvarado, Dyson Daniels, who they just drafted 7th. All these guys are young guys that need a veteran presence to kind of show them the way. They've used a guy like JJ Redick in the past, but he wasn't here long enough to really kind of make that impact and dealt with some of the COVID stuff. CJ is the guy that just kind of brings that professionalism to the team, and that's so important. You see him at times almost like annoyed with some of the younger guys on the team for things they do in game, and he's trying to kind of get them to snap out of it and do what they need to do, and they listen to him. Getting buy-in is one of the most important things that you can get in the NBA. If you can get buy-in from players as a coach or another player, that's a very, very valuable skill, and he has that. He's also a guy that can get buckets when he needs to. He's not the most efficient guy, but he's a three-point threat. And when you're playing with Zion, you're going to get wide open three-point looks. He'll take what defenses give him in the mid-range. He's great there too. They've used him kind of more as a point guard, so you're seeing more of his passing ability this year. Just kind of, when it was the trade deadline last year, there was like so much smoke around CJ McCollum going to the Pelicans because it's just the move that made so much sense. Like everyone was like, this is going to happen. And lo and behold, it did because sometimes these things just kind of work the way they should. And trading for CJ McCollum last year, bringing him in, giving him a new extension so that he's here long term, I think all kind of part of the master plan of what they're trying to build here in New Orleans, and having that veteran presence that's a very, very, very productive player is a big part of it.